So hello everyone. I hope all of you who are here today have either taken the snap and or some of you may be planning to take snap 2 or snap 3 and you're here to understand what happened in today's snap. So I'm going to be covering all of that over the next 15-20 minutes. So let's get started. And the first thing that I'm going to start with is, of course, that the format of the test. There was no change whatsoever. So the way they have indicated the number of questions and in each of the sections, it remained exactly the same. And regarding normalization also, the instruction was clearly given on the admit card. And they had also mentioned it on the screen which you see right before the test begins. So on that screen, it was clearly written that there will not be any normalization. And they have taken all of these things into account while creating the test. So they have tried to match the difficulty of all the tests that they have created, and they will not be normalizing. Any correspondence in that communication will not be entertained. That is also something that they have given. Though ideally they should be normalizing, but that's what it is, and we can't really help that. So the number of sections remain exactly the same. 3 sections. Start with the verbal ability, then you have the logic, and then you have the math section or the quant section. Marking scheme remained exactly the same, +1, -0.25, and total 60 minutes for 60 questions. So overall, how did you guys find it? If you can write it in the chat window, how many attempts you made. I can see a lot of you have written 35, 46, 43, 42, 49, 52 attempts and so on. So that's a very good position to be in for a lot of you. Overall, I think the paper was a balanced paper. If I were to compare it with some of the previous years of SNAP, I'll also make that comparison. Overall, if you look at the general English, right, the English section, you can classify it as easy because there were few question types, of course, things like identifying what is simile and metaphor and so on and so forth, or the antonym question that was there. Some people would have found that difficult. But overall, because there were a lot of questions which were direct in nature, there was nothing from RC. So there was no reading comprehension passage, making it a little easier for people. So overall, I would say that if you look at the total or the overall difficulty of this particular section, I will classify it as easy. And if you're somebody who has attempted about 11 to 12 questions and you're hoping to get most of it correct, I think that's a reasonably good attempt. I think a lot of people would have also gone with more than that attempt because the downside is pretty low, right? So let's say if you got 12 or 13 questions correct and you're very sure that those are correct, even if you mark the remaining two, the downside is not going to be that significant. So a lot of people would have taken the chances for a couple of questions. But barring these questions, I think 11, 12 questions should have been done by a lot of people. The second thing, which was analytical and logical reasoning, overall, this can be classified as easy to medium. 19 to 20 attempts were possible. There were some questions where you could have taken half chances. For example, questions on syllogisms, questions on identifying implicit statement, the assumption, conclusion kind of questions, or the course of action kind of questions. There you could have taken some half chances, but you would have at least attempted these questions because the remaining wasn't very difficult. Maybe 1 or 2 questions of coding, decoding, if you were not able to crack those. Keeping all of that in mind, I think it was possible for a well-prepared candidate to go with something like 19 to 20 attempts with pretty good accuracy. I would say when I'm saying good attempts, I'm also factoring in that you would have got about 90, 95% or even more accuracy. The last, which is of course the quant section, and that turned out to be the most difficult one if you were to compare it with the remaining two. Overall, I would say it's medium to difficult because there were some questions which were very, very difficult. And when you say very difficult, it is compared to the traditional difficulty of SNAP. For example, questions on the geometric progression, the arithmetic progression and the geometric progression questions, right? Or there was the question on trigonometry that would have stumped a lot of people. Question on logarithms, right? So a lot of these questions and even permutation combination probability, I think there were a lot of questions regarding PNC probability. And a lot of people would have struggled with these topics, especially if there are people who had never done these topics to begin with. So overall, I would say 12 to 13 attempts if you have done in the math section, that's a reasonably good attempt. And again, assuming like a 90+% accuracy here. Time distribution, I would say about 10, 11 minutes is what you should have spent on the English section because there were no RCs. A lot of people would have attempted the entire thing in about 7, 8 minutes as well. Speaking of the analytical logical reasoning, I think 24, 25 minutes is what it required. And for quant, you would have completed it in about, or maybe the attempts 12 to 13, about 20, 22 minutes. not more than that. I got to a few, and what I realized was a lot of them said that if you had started with quant, right, then you would have been in a difficult position. So maybe that could be a lesson for people who are going to go for snap 2 and 3, that it may not be very good idea to start with quant. And if it is especially difficult, don't sit on it for a very long time. Okay, try to finish the other easy questions first, and then you can always come back to the quant section, right? So now let's go to the individual sections. And before we get there, just want to do some bit of prediction, right? And predictions are always tricky. Please don't take any specific decisions based on the predictions that I'm making at this point of time. Why we are making these predictions, and there were three of us from the academics team who ended up taking the snap. We found it to be very close to the snap one difficult. So snap 21, if you look at it, uh, that time the score versus cutoff, the figures, the score versus percentile, if you look at these figures, I think this year's snap, at least I'm talking about the first snap that happened today, will resemble that, because it wasn't like snap 22, definitely wasn't like snap 2020. It was more like snap 21 is what we felt. So we are hoping that something like a 98 percentile, which is generally the cutoff for SIBM Pune, should be somewhere around 41, 42, a little bit here and there, right? Because there is that 0.25, 0.5, 0.75 that can happen, right? Regarding SCM-HRD, the 97th percentile should be close to 3940. And you will notice that that difference will be very insignificant. So between a 98 and a 97, the difference will be very marginal. It's going to be probably 1 or 2 marks. That's about it. And then the next milestone, which is about 1992 percentile, something that is needed for SIIB Pune and SIBM Bangalore, that should be somewhere around 36, 37, right? Again, the difference becomes, that distribution is such that a lot of people get stuck in those ranges. And that is why you will see possibly 1 mark making a difference of 2, 3, or even 5 percentile in some cases. So going from a 40 to 37, which is just 3 questions, can drop your percentile from a 97 to 92 is what we are thinking, right? So that is going to happen. Of course, we'll wait for snap 2 and 3, maybe revise these estimates if required. But otherwise, personally, and even after discussing it with a lot of students and the acads team, what we believe is that it was very close to snap 21 and not close to snap 22 or snap 20. Okay, but again, I'm doing that comparison with the last 3 years. So let's now talk about the individual sections very quickly, starting with the general English section. And again, no point spending too much time on it. Maybe 10, 11 minutes maximum is what you should have looked at. Questions, again, no RCs, so there was nothing much to read. Direct questions, so 1 or 2 liners is what it was. And technical questions, right? Identifying parts of speech from the given poem, choosing the sentence with correct usage. So 2 questions from the first type, 5 from the second one, right? So 7 questions out of 15 were only these 2 areas: parts of speech and then choosing sentence with correct usage. Fill in the blank, there were 3 questions, then figure of speech 2, antonym 1, proverb based 1, and idiom based 1, right? So you had all these question types which made an appearance. Pretty much everything that gets covered in the verbal ability was there, but you didn't have anything such as parajumbles, right? So nothing on parajumbles, nothing on summary, nothing on para completion per se. So, and of course, nothing on RC. So it is going to be direct, and I'm hoping that they will continue to that pattern in Snap 2 and 3 as well, where they ask direct questions. You can solve it in under a minute for sure, right? So strategy wise, I would say about 10 minutes is what you should be looking at for completing the entire general English. Speaking of how I went about it, so I started with English. I always start Snap with English because it's like the easiest section of all the sections. I spent about initial 5 minutes and did my first round, wherein I had attempted about 11 to 12 questions, and then the remaining I kept on for my kept remaining for the second round. Why I do that is because there'll be some questions where you have to think a little bit more. You maybe want to spend some more time. For example, I think the countable and uncountable noun question, right? I didn't do it in my first round. I thought it's better done in the second round. So initial 5 minutes were for the first 10, 11 questions, the easy ones. And then I had kept the remaining one for the second round. Let's talk about the next section, which is like the biggest chunk, which is analytical and logical reasoning. Overall, I would say easy to medium difficulty, as I mentioned, and good attempts would be around 19 to 20. So let's start with the verbal reasoning part of it. Now, within verbal reasoning, a lot of questions on syllogisms, statement and course of action, critical reasoning, which is inference based. So we had two questions of each of these. Then statement and assumption, three questions. So there was something about a kid in a toy store, right? And then you had to identify which of the assumptions is implicit. Cause effect questions, right? Something related to heavy rain and then waterlogging, logically correct sequence. So that question I think was very easy question. So overall, for all of these questions, you can say these are easy questions. Now, even if you may not know the exact answer, you may not be very confident about it, but it was possible to take a shot that, okay, I think this is the answer, or maybe you're narrowed down to two options and then you choose one of them. So that was doable. And that is why I'm classifying it as easy. When it comes to the non-verbal reasoning side of it, the series question, I think there was one particular question which might have stumped a few people. I am classifying that as medium, but otherwise the remaining series questions were very easy to do. So completing the series, whether it was numbers and letters combined, one of the question was medium, the other two were pretty straightforward. Two circular arrangements, but by the way, these two circular arrangements were standalone. So you have one circular arrangement of six people facing towards the center of the circle. There was only one question on it. Then another question with six different people sitting around a table and then away from the center. So they were looking outside, right? But very, very straightforward. I think anybody who has done basic arrangements, right, would have been in a position to answer these two questions. Then there were two questions on clocks. One was very easy, when you had to find the angle at 7:34, if I recall correctly. And the second one was a little tricky because there was a division by zero happening there, right? So you have to understand that dividing by zero is something that is not defined. Family tree, two questions, fairly manageable. One of them felt like those WhatsApp forwards that you get, that somebody's father had five sons, and then the remaining four names are given. So who is the fifth son, kind of a question. So that one was, I think, again, both the questions were fairly doable. I would say easy. In coding decoding, I think one question was slightly tricky. The zebra one, I think, that one was a little tricky, but otherwise the remaining one was easy. And then two miscellaneous logical reasoning questions. So overall, doable. Right? A lot of it was doable. There was one on syllogisms, as some of you I saw discussing, right, regarding the mouse pad. Uh, Something was off about that question, right? So maybe I think going with neither was possibly a strategy to to do, but then not sure what exactly were they doing, because the conclusion that was given, right, wasn't mice, it was Mike. I reread it, it was MIC. So there was a problem maybe with the question. I'm not very sure what exactly they wanted. So I think going with something like a neither would have been a good thing to do. And then that brings us to the last section, and the one which was like the most difficult part, the quantitative ability, data interpretation, and DS. There was no data sufficiency by the way. So there was no question on data sufficiency. On DI also, there was only one set with one question on it. So I think it was some 16th or 17th question, if I recall correctly. And I started reading it and I thought that there will be multiple questions. So I thought, let me check. And I clicked on the next question. Then I realized that there was only one question on this particular DI set. I'm wondering, why did they even put it as a DI set in the first place? They could have simply asked a quant question, right? So anyway, but one set of DI with I think 6 or 7 states given and a percentage of people below some education level, and then the male female split was there. Fairly doable question. I would say classify it as easy question. You just had to find the population of a particular state. In arithmetic, most of the questions were simple. Okay, so you can classify that as easy, but there was one question which you can consider to be the medium question, right? In modern mathematics, so permutation, combination, probability, I would classify most of the questions as difficult. So there was a question on probability, right, where you have three groups X, Y, and Z. So you roll a die, and then depending on what number you get, if you get 1, then it is group X, 2 and 3 it is Y, 4, 5, and 6 it is Z. And then within that, there is different number of girls and boys given. And then there is that roll that happens, and then whatever, you choose a girl, then what is the probability that that girl is from the group Y, right? So Slightly calculation intensive question also, and a lot of people might not have been in a position to handle it. Even the question on the arithmetic progression, right, was a painful one, right? You had to do a fair bit of steps to get to the final answer. There was a question on trigonometry that was also pretty intense, values such as 15 and 75. So a lot of people would not know what the values are, right? That made it a difficult question. Even the question of, I think, three people, seven chocolates or something getting split with at least one person having one, right? That also was a little intensive. So I would say about 5 or 6 questions can be definitely classified as difficult in this paper overall. 5 of them came from modern mathematics and one from geometry. The hexagon question that was there, hexagon triangle, there are tricks to do these questions, and that is why you cannot call it to be very, very difficult per se. That is something that is manageable if you know your foundations very, very well. From numbers, we didn't have a lot of questions. From algebra also, there was only one question that made an appearance, right? But I think the logarithms question was very, very good. I think I had my aha moment during the test with that logarithm question. X, Y, Z are three consecutive positive integers. And I think you had to find some log of 1 plus Y is equal to 2A or something like that. Very nice question, because if X, Y, Z are three consecutive number, X and Z can be written as Y minus 1 and Y plus 1. So very nice question it was. So overall, paper, the quant was difficult. 12 to 13 is something that can be considered as a good attempt. If you have done about 10, 11 questions and you're expecting it to be pretty much everything correct, I think you have done a reasonably good job. Okay. I'm taking you back to the slide where we spoke about the expected percentile, score versus percentile. I'm hoping that this particular thing comes out to be true, but of course we'll have to wait for snap 2 and 3. So because there's no normalization, right, whatever we say today, snap 2 and 3 can completely change that. So what if snap 2 and 3 is easy, people score on the higher side? So all of these things are there as possibilities. Don't overthink it, right? So if you're planning to take snap 2 or 3 or both, don't overthink these things. Just try to do justice to the test that is there in front of you, right? So I would suggest that you have that forward looking mindset and don't worry too much about what has already happened, right? But overall, some very good questions. I think apart from those random syllogism I wouldn't call it error, but it was a little different from what you typically get to see. I would say paper was very similar to what it has been in the last 3 years, with slight fluctuations in difficulty here and there. But I think somebody who had well prepared would have been in a position to solve about 44, 45 questions, hoping to get a 40 plus score, right? So that is something that I will call as the overall verdict on the test. Any questions that you have, you may post it in the chat window. We can probably discuss it a little bit. Not going to be discussing questions a lot because there's no point as such. The test is already done. But any questions apart from that, anything that you want to know, right? Okay. Answers of particular questions, I don't remember most of it, but yeah, I think clocks was there, and I guess 734 should be something like a 23 degree, right? Okay. Previous year questions, are they helpful? Yeah. So if you do the snap past year papers, they earlier they used to release it. Some of those papers are available in MyMS dashboard. It's good to have a look at it. I would suggest that just have a look at it. It's not something that is very, very close to what snap pattern is right now. For example, in those papers, you will also see GK questions. You can ignore that and do the remaining questions. Okay. When will the score or answer key be released? Okay, so Snap doesn't reveal answer key. So they will not be giving answer key as such. The result is expected to be on the 10th Jan. I think that has been announced already, that the result will be announced on the 10th of January. There will not be any normalization. So what they do is, let's say you have taken one slot or multiple slots, they will basically take the maximum score that you have, and they'll do the same thing for everybody who has taken the test, and then take that to calculate percentile of the student. IMS mock difficulty versus SNAP, I would say very, very similar. at least the one that we had today, because you never know how it will be in Snap 2 and 3. But what we saw today, right, was very, very close to what you see on the IMS mocks as well. See, quant difficulty now, you never know, right, what kind of questions will appear, because there were very, very straightforward questions as well today in arithmetic. So there was one question where three people are there. The first and the second have, I think, money or something in the ratio 2:3. The second and third, they have money in the ratio 2:3. And now you have to find the total money with them is given to you. Just have to find how much money one of them will have. That's like the basic question of ratio proportion, right? It cannot get more easy than that. So there were a lot of questions like that as well. It's just that those 4 or 5 questions, if you had sat on them for a very long time, you would have then been in a difficult situation. The arithmetic progression question, the logarithm question, the trigonometry question, the splitting of 7 object question. So ideally, somebody should have just avoided these questions and focused on the remaining, because the rest of the paper was good. Is 44 a good attempt? Again, it depends on what you are aiming for. But if you've got reasonably good accuracy, if you're looking at something like a 95% or 100% accuracy, I think that's a very good attempt to have. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how things unfold. Right? I am taking Snap 2 and 3. What should I do in the remaining days? Right? Continue to do what you have been doing. Right? So taking IMS mocks that you have done so far, doing past year papers, all of that, just continue the effort. Now, since you've already taken Snap 1, you also know what exactly happened on the test. Or if you have seen this review, you know what happened. So you just have to now focus on that. I would definitely encourage people to do the technical aspect of grammar. So understanding what is adverb, what is adjective, conjunction, how is it used in a sentence, then changing voice, active voice, passive voice, right? Countable nouns, simile, metaphor, personification, all of these technical things. Ensure that you do it, because Snap is going to ask these questions to you. Okay. Is it true that the difficulty of the Snap increases in test 2 and 3? No, that is definitely not true. That is not the case. In fact, in one of the years, it was found that the third Snap was the easiest, but it's very, very random, right? So you never know how exactly it is. Plus, what also happens is that by the time people go for Snap 3, they are better prepared, which also means that somewhere they will find it to be a little easier. So these differences will be there in difficulty, but don't worry too much about it. Okay. Response sheet will come before result. No, so they do not reveal the response sheet unless there is a question which is something that you know for sure is an error. You can write to the Snap authority, but otherwise paper will not be released. Answer key will not be released. There would not be any objection window as such. It's just final result that will be announced on 10 Jan. Okay. All right. I think with this, we have pretty much reached the end of the discussion. Thank you so much for joining. Hope those of you who appeared for the test today had a decent paper and attempt. Those of you who are planning to take it in slot 2 and 3, which is Snap 2 and 3, wish all of you all the best. Hope this has helped you and given you an overview of what happened. If there are any questions regarding Snap, feel free to ask me as drop a comment on this video once it goes on YouTube, and I'll try and respond at the earliest. Thanks everyone once again for joining. Wish all of you all the best.